Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
I think it's safe to say that most Americans strive to live long, healthy lives. However, many people do fall short of that, and chronic disease becomes a major problem, and we see this becoming more of an exponential growth over time, and there's many different factors that play into this. We can look at diet, we can look at our exposure to different pollutions that we know certainly can have an impact in a incredibly negative way when it comes to heart health, when it comes to brain health. Today, I want to focus in on heart disease specifically because we know that this is a major problem in the United States. We know that heart disease is the leading cause of death for men and women throughout the United States, and close to 700,000 Americans die from heart disease each year. So that's 1 in every 4 deaths throughout this country. Or we can break it down and say 1 person dies every 36 seconds in the United States from cardiovascular disease. So I want to talk about heart disease in some detail today because there's been a couple of interesting studies that came out in this last week out of Europe that I think kind of bring to the attention why we should be more proactive when it comes to heart health rather than reactive. We don't want to wait until something is wrong with our heart before we take action. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and today I want to focus in on heart disease. Not only does this come with major health implications, but we also understand when it comes to the cost of healthcare services, medicines, the loss of productivity. For example, it is estimated that around $220 billion each year is the overall cost to the society when it comes to heart disease. So we can kind of break this down into different subsections. We can look at coronary artery disease, which is the most common type of heart disease. And then we can look at, heart attacks. We know that when it comes to heart attacks, roughly around 800,000 Americans each year have a heart attack. And we understand that for many people, heart attacks are a silent process and there is significant damage done to the heart muscle itself, even though you may be unaware that you actually even had a heart attack. We talk about different things throughout the health spectrum that we consider to be kind of silent diseases. We can look at things like osteoporosis, for example. We know that that's a silent disease. Most people don't recognize or can feel their bones getting weaker. Same thing when it comes to heart attack. About 1 in 5 heart attacks is actually what is known as a silent heart attack, where there's significant damage done, but yet you are unaware of that. Maybe it's a situation where you do have some shortness of breath, some, heaviness within the chest area, and then that passes. And it wasn't ever to the degree of severity that you felt the need to go seek medical attention. And so this is why we certainly like to be able to understand more about this. And when we look at Americans that are at a greater risk for the development of heart disease, this is where the problem really comes in, because we understand the trifecta of things such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, when we look at metabolic syndrome. So overweight and obesity certainly play a role into this. We know that diet is a primary factor, which obviously diet would then be linked with diabetes and linked with obesity, linked along with high cholesterol, high blood pressure, the loss of blood glucose control regulation within the body. So a lot of different things, as well as physical inactivity. We know that Americans as a whole are relatively inactive. There are not a lot of people that adhere to a good, healthy diet along with healthy lifestyle. So we see all of these different factors and we have to, take action on this. So today I wanted to talk about some of the different things that you can be doing when it comes to lifestyle modifications, making sure that you are doing things such as eating, heart healthy foods, which in turn would be brain healthy foods, which in turn would be whole body healthy foods, which is why I'm such a stickler when it comes to adhering to a Mediterranean diet, because the Mediterranean style diet really does encompass all of those main nutrients that the body needs at that cellular level in order to thrive. So getting that full spectrum of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants along with good healthy fats and proteins. So this is why adherence to that Mediterranean style diet has been shown time after time in terms of scientific research as being the best choice when it comes to overall health. When we look at the cardiovascular studies done with the Mediterranean diet, we know and we recognize just how beneficial that is for the heart. So this is why I wanted to bring up this topic today. And there was 2 studies that just came out, as I mentioned earlier, coming out of Europe and focusing in on heart health. And the one study that was published through the European Society of Cardiology was assessing your overall heart health via climbing stairs. And you may think, well, that seems, not that scientific, but actually it is. And they found that climbing 4 flights of stairs in less than 1 minute was an indication of good heart health. And so in this particular study that they set up, they were conducting this to examine the relationship between daily activity, things such as climbing stairs, and the results obtained from exercise testing in a laboratory setting. So the idea of this particular study was to find a simple and inexpensive method for assessing heart health, which for me, in the world of, public health, I think this is a great thing. Sometimes we think that we have to have the most advanced or the most expensive tests in order to determine our health outcomes. But this is a very cheap way to assess someone's cardiovascular health. And so in this study, they took a group of people and they had them go in for this exercise testing. And they did this because they had the suspicion that they had coronary artery disease. So they had things such as chest pain, shortness of breath during exercise, things that are definitely linked to coronary artery disease. And what they had them do was they asked them to climb 4 flights of stairs. So this was roughly 60 stairs at a fast pace without stopping. So not stopping at the landing, just keep going. And they said they didn't want them to run, try to run up the stairs, but just try and move at a rapid pace. And then they timed that out to see how fast they could do this. Now, what they were able to determine from this was that those patients, about 58% of the patients who completed their stair climb in more than 1.5 minutes, had abnormal heart function during the next level of testing, which was via treadmill examination. So I think that's really kind of interesting. They found that just 32% of those who climbed the stairs in less than 1 minute had an abnormal heart function during the treadmill. So there was a very strong correlation between those who could actually complete that task and those who truly had underlying heart disease. So, that's cheap and simple and effective way to assess this. Now, I think that's kind of butts up to another study that came out of Norway through the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, looking at high intensity interval training. And they were able to determine that this actually strengthened the heart even more than moderate exercise. So this has been kind of on the forefront of exercise science over the past decade, where they've looked at how high energy bursts of exercise actually are providing more benefit to the body than just doing moderate exercise, every single day doing, maybe walking 30 minutes, which we still certainly encourage. But this is an area of research that I think is starting to really gain a lot of momentum. And what they did in this particular study, which was published in the Journal of Molecular and Cellular Cardiology, the researchers went to great lengths to investigate what happens inside of those tiny heart muscle cells after regular exercise. And they found that exercise improves important properties both in the way the heart muscle cells are working during exercise. At the same time, they were also looking at the electrical conduction signal within the heart. And they were able to really see that how the more intense short-term training, that type of exercise did much better in terms of overall cardiovascular improvement. So they were looking at the heartbeat, they were looking at the sinus node, they were looking at, which is the heart's internal own pacemaker. That's what sends out those electrical impulses to the rest of the heart. And through looking at this and looking at the action potential, the way that the heart muscle cells are working, they found that fast burst of exercise actually showed more efficacy when it came to the overall heart health itself, which I think is really quite impressive. There's a lot of different ways in which we can look at exercise, and we can see all of the many different benefits. And, you can look at aerobic exercise, we can look at people who are more, cardio focused exercise, but we know that exercise strengthens the heart so it can, properly pump the blood out to the rest of the body. So even if you are, doing more of the light aerobic exercise, that's still very good. But what they were showing within this study out of Norway was that the faster that the heart muscle actually had to work, the better it did in terms of overall response rate after that exercise. So I think that that's an area that we should all kind of keep our eyes on, because I saw a documentary probably about 5 years ago now where they were looking at this high intensity interval training where they would have people do like 1 to 2 minutes of just like really high endurance training and then back right off of it. And they were seeing, in terms of muscle recovery, they were looking at, levels of lactic acid buildup, and it was really very impressive. And so now that we're seeing this replicated and looking specifically at the cardiovascular function, I think is really quite pronounced in terms of how advanced we have become, even though I talked about a very non-advanced method for assessing heart health with the stair climbing study. But I still think that at the end of the day, that this is an area that we should really kind of keep our eye on, because we may start to see a different way in which we address cardiovascular health moving forward into the future. Now, here's another bit of information that I sometimes think gets overlooked, and this is when it comes to different antioxidants for the heart. We know that there are key nutrients that the heart definitely requires, things such as coenzyme Q10, for example, and that ubiquinol form is the preferred way in which to take that. But I also want to talk about green tea just for a moment, because in the Nutrition Research Journal about 10 years ago now, they did a double-blind trial which found the beneficial impact of green tea extract when it came to blood pressure, inflammation, oxidative stress, which when we think about heart health, these are things that we definitely want to go after. We want to make sure that we are easing inflammation in the body, that we have a good way to regulate our blood pressure. At the same time, we want to keep a minimum amount of oxidative stress occurring that can create extreme damage to those cardiac myocytes. So in this particular study, they were giving folks roughly about 350 milligrams of green tea extract for 3 months, and then they were analyzing their blood pressure, their serum lipid levels, so looking at their cholesterol, looking at their glucose levels, so even for regulation of blood glucose and insulin, they were looking at different antioxidant levels, and they were also looking at inflammatory markers, including TNF-alpha, which is tumor necrosis factor alpha, as well as C-reactive protein. So they measured all of these levels prior to the start of this trial, and then they measured at 3 months at the conclusion of the trial. And at the end of the study, the subjects that were in the green tea extract group had improved insulin resistance, they had improvement in blood pressure, they had improvement in their overall cholesterol, they had improvement in all these different markers for inflammation, as well as their total antioxidant status. So this is why I like to talk about different things that we can be doing that we know are advantageous when it comes to cardiovascular health, which is why I'm always a big fan of people utilizing like the green tea TX as part of your liquid intake every day. So using maybe 1 to 2 full droppers of the green tea TX in with some water every single day. Think about all the power of that EGCG, the epigallocatechin gallate, that powerful antioxidant that is derived from the green tea, and just how beneficial that can be for the heart. And thinking about how that's targeting cholesterol and how that's helping to support healthy blood pressure and easing inflammation. There's so many different utilizations and studies that show the true benefit of green tea. So I just wanted to mention that as a side note. Now, obviously, when we're thinking about cardiovascular health, there are main things that I always turn to, which would be having adequate magnesium. We need to make sure we have appropriate magnesium in terms for that SA node, for that electrical conduction system within the heart. So magnesium is certainly critical. Having adequate amounts of coenzyme Q10 to allow for the heart muscles to create energy. So if we are lacking in that energy production of ATP, that will impact the overall cardiac function. So having coenzyme Q10 in that ubiquinol form, also very, very important. But I also turn towards things like ribose, for example. And we know that ribose is a very powerful carbohydrate that helps, once again, for enhancing the ATP production within the cardiac myocytes specifically. So for those who do have the concerns when it comes to cardiovascular health, maybe you have some of these underlying predisposing conditions that can lead to an exacerbation of heart disease, then you definitely want to make sure that as part of your routine, you are incorporating things like ubiquinol every single day, that you have magnesium on board, that you include something such as ribose. And as far as how much you should be taking, this is when you'd want to reach out to one of our nutritional experts to be able to really personalize that to your specific needs. So that is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Now, do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.